From the author of Spinsterella, a strange and unusual romance, and Spellbound, a darker shade of black, comes the legendary Magic Children. Pick up the conclusion of the Spinsterella trilogy in paperback and e-readers this Halloween. I got an opportunity to take a look at more episodes of Netflix's Defenders, and now I believe I can give people a balanced and honest review of this series. And when I take a look at this series from a critical perspective, I can honestly say this is the worst thing Marvel Studios has ever produced. And if Marvel Studios continues to produce products on the level of quality of this Netflix Defenders, they're not going to be a competitor in the superhero film game for much longer, because Netflix's Defenders is absolutely terrible. Why is it terrible? Because when I look at Netflix's Defenders from a screenwriter's perspective, it's clear to me that the writers of Netflix's Defenders were not clear about what they wanted to do with this series. Because for screenwriters to take 4 episodes to form a team, that shows me that they have no focus and that they had no real vision for this series, and that they were really rushing to slap something together in the hopes of having something ready for August. What they should have done was delay this Defenders until next year, when they did a Daredevil Season 3 and Jessica Jones Season 2, and then they would have had some sort of foundation for the structure for forming this team. Because right now, as it stands, they didn't have a solid structure to establish this team being formed, and that's why the entire structure of this series completely collapsed by the first 5 minutes of the first episode, because that first episode had one goal, and that was to establish why we needed the Defenders, and they did not do that in the first episode. When I watch other television series like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Xena Warrior Princess, Hercules the Legendary Journeys, and Knight Rider, they clearly showed me who this main character was, what they wanted to do, what their mission was, and most importantly, why should I care enough to watch this series? I mean, I can look at the first episode of Supergirl, which came out about 2 years ago, and within 5 minutes, they hooked you with a strong, inciting incident with Kara saving people on that plane. And when I look at Netflix's Defenders, it's just egregious that it takes them 4 episodes to form a super team, when Supergirl established why she was needed within 5 minutes, and Xena established what she wanted to do in 5 minutes, and Buffy the Vampire Slayer established what she wanted to do in 5 minutes, and by the 30 minutes of Knight Rider, we had Michael Knight in the car with Kit, getting ready to go on a mission to find out who killed him. How can those shows go out of their way to give me a quality story in a simple amount of time, but it takes almost 4 hours for Netflix to tell me why we need the Defenders, and the reasons why they tell me that we need the Defenders are absolutely ridiculous. You're telling me that you need all 4 of these heroes to come together to take on the Hand, but the big problem with that whole argument is this: you have not really established the Hand as some sort of villain that we need to care about. On Iron Fist, the Hand was really not been handled very well, and in Daredevil, they haven't been handled very well. So we don't see the Hand as some sort of credible threat, but this is par for the course for Marvel Studios projects, because they don't know how to write a decent villain. And when I look at Sigourney Weaver's character, who's supposed to be one of the fingers of the Hand, or the head of the Hand, she just doesn't work at all. The character is so poorly written that you don't really see her as this bad guy you love to hate. In fact, you just wind up becoming indifferent to Sigourney Weaver's character, because she doesn't come across as some sort of credible threat to the city. We're told she's a danger to the city, and that's another big problem with many of these Netflix shows, that they tell us everything instead of showing us. In screenwriting, it's a visual medium, and the Marvel Studios writers really need to understand that you have to show me why somebody's a threat.
When I looked at Sigourney Weaver's character, who's supposed to be the head of this ninja organization, Master Assassins, she does not show me why I should see her as a threat. She's just standing around in fancy clothes and talking about stuff, and that's just not enough when it comes down to a visual medium like film. Because in a visual medium like film, you have to show people why the bad guy is a threat. And when I look at Sigourney Weaver's character, she never showed us why she was a threat. It's implied that she's a threat because she's wearing fancy clothes, but as a guy who writes screenplays and writes stories, I can tell you that's just not enough. Sigourney Weaver's character did not come across to me as some sort of leader of a ninja organization. I would think the leader of a ninja organization, even if she was dying, would be able to go out here and be able to take on someone like Iron Fist, or even be capable of defending themselves in some sort of way. When I look at Sigourney Weaver's character, she just does not feel like the leader of a ninja organization like the Hand. She's just not credible in that role, and that derails the entire series. Now, the other thing that derails this entire Defenders series is, again, the foundation of this team, because this team does not come together in an organic fashion like the Avengers came together. Now, when the Avengers came together, you had Nick Fury, who brought all these heroes together to be a part of this Avengers initiative. And that led to those heroes coming together in an organic fashion and them having chemistry. This team comes together in a very awkward and disorganized fashion, and the pieces just don't come together. I mean, Luke Cage's whole angle is completely off when it comes down to the formation of this team, and Jessica Jones is really being held on by a shaky thread. Daredevil's is just all over the place, and Iron Fist reason just again is the only one that really makes sense, but he's the weakest character out of the whole group of these series, and none of them come together in an organic fashion to show us why we need this team to come together to take on this threat of the Hand. Because again, I look at Luke Cage's whole angle, he has absolutely nothing to do with the Hand whatsoever, and the reasons that they bring him in to take on the Hand make absolutely no sense. Jessica Jones's don't make sense either. She's just kind of thrown in an awkward fashion, and the whole way this team comes together is really awkward and forced by the fourth episode. And in that fourth episode, we get a little bit of action, but then we go right back to talking in the Chinese restaurant. And that's another big problem with this Defender series. This is an action show. Where is the action? All I get are minor, small scenes of action and almost 30 to 40 minutes of talking. With an action show, people want to see fights, they want to see kung fu, they want to see walls getting broken, they want to see this going on for at least 10, 15 minutes of an action show, or at least 15 to 20 minutes of an action show. It should not be talk, 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 talk. And the Defenders is so talky, it's just not funny. And you don't want talk in an action series. You want action. You want fights. You want gymnastics. And we don't get that with Netflix Defenders. All we get are periods of exposition, long episodes of exposition, and no action whatsoever. And that's what is one of the big disappointments about Netflix's Defenders. Where they're supposed to be defending the city, but we never see them going towards doing this because of the slow pacing, terrible plotting, poor characterizations, and total lack of direction on this show. This show has absolutely no idea what it wants to do. And the reason why I believe it has no idea of what it wants to do is because the producers rushed this series to production, and they shouldn't have rushed it, because I can look at many of the scenes in Netflix's Defenders and see how they really rushed a lot of those scenes. Because I remember one scene where Iron Fist, he's going all the way up to the Hand's offices, and he's going to announce who he is. That scene was so amateurish, it wasn't funny. That's something a first-year screenwriter writes in their first draft. And when I looked at that scene, I was saying to myself, why is he announcing that he is the Iron Fist and he's coming to take people down? That's something out of an episode of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. That's not something you would put in a Marvel Studios project. That's just poor quality overall. And that's a scene that would have been scrapped by a seasoned professional head writer. He would have said, look, that whole scene with Danny Rand coming up off the elevator, walking into the boardroom, that's ridiculous. And then all of a sudden, Luke Cage is going to come in and help Danny Rand when he's in trouble. Daredevil's running up the stairs, and Jessica Jones is on the elevator, and they're all coming in to fight them. And I looked at that episode, and I said to myself, this is the worst thing I have ever seen in my life. This is just poor plotting, poor structure, poor setup. And this is supposed to be the scene where the team finally comes together, but when they come together, they don't give you a reason to care about why they come together. They don't give you a reason about why they should form. They're just all showing up all of a sudden, and they're all fighting together. And then after they've fought these ninjas and assassins, they go and hide in this Chinese restaurant to go spend more time having more conversations. Just absolutely ridiculous. And this series is absolutely ridiculous. And I look at this series and I look at the other works that Marvel Studios has produced recently, such as Iron Fist, the back six of Luke Cage, and Spider-Man Homecoming, and I clearly see a decline in quality at Marvel Studios as it relates to their projects, because I'm not seeing projects on the same high standard level that we got in 2008 with Iron Man, 2010 with Captain America, the First Avenger, and with the Avengers in 2011, I believe. We're not getting that high level of quality that we used to get with these Marvel Studios films. I'm seeing a decline in quality, and I'm seeing that people are letting standards really slip in terms of adaptation and staying true to the source material and the characters, and even maintaining some sort of standard as it relates to storytelling, because the stories for Defenders were just not good enough. These were first drafts written by first-year screenwriters. That's how amateurish this writing is, and this is the kind of stuff that if I were the head writer of the Defenders division, this stuff would not even be going to production. The dialogue is terrible, the scene setups are terrible, everything about this series writing is absolutely horrible, and that's why we have this series that is incredibly slow, filled with exposition, filled with awkward fight scenes, filled with scenes that do not transition in a smooth and organic fashion, and filled with characters that don't make us care about them outside of them being popular Marvel characters. Because that's what the only reason why people would watch this series. Because if I were to change the names of all these characters from popular Marvel characters and just call them Joe, Jack, Jane, and John, you would probably not want to watch this series because the writing is just that bad. And it's a shame that Marvel Studios is not making efforts to try to correct this problem, because when I look at this series, it's clear to me they are on a serious decline in terms of their writing and the quality of the writing being produced at Marvel Studios, because you have series where when you start out a series with an expositional scene instead of a strong inciting incident, that's not a good sign for that series. When you can't tell me who the main character is, who is the bad guy in the series that is going to drive the conflict in the first 5 minutes, you haven't done your job. When you can't tell me what the villain really wants in that first 5 minutes, you haven't done your job. And when you can't give me a reason to care within 5 minutes, you haven't done your job as a screenwriter. And when I look at this series, they really need to do something about their screenwriters, because the screenwriting at Marvel Studios, the standards have declined, and that's why we're seeing such poor quality on screen with their series. And when I look at Netflix Defenders, there's nothing to defend about this series. This series is one of the worst things ever produced by Marvel Studios, and if they continue on this track, they're going to be on the same position that DC's films are. I mean, I thought Zack Snyder was bad, but it's looking to me like Netflix is starting to get into a horse race with DC for who can produce the worst superhero adaptation known to man. When it comes down to Netflix's Defenders, I can't recommend this. This series is absolutely terrible, and it's something you really just need to avoid watching. If you'd like to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon by clicking the link in the description box. And if you'd like to try some of the SJS Direct titles, you can do so by clicking the link to Amazon.com. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.